We're going to need another otter. I'm just kidding. No, we just did a fascinating story on, believe it or not, cadaver otters that are now being put to work to find cadavers or, lost bodies in parts of South Florida, which I find very neat. And the phrase that one of the gentlemen used, we're going to need another otter, just not only harkens to the movie Jaws, but just it's iconic, if you ask me. It should be a decal or on a coffee mug or something. But good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in over on News 6 Plus, as well as over on our News 6 YouTube channel. This is meteorologist David Nazario in for meteorologist Jonathan Kegges tonight for your News 6 at 9:30. News 6 weather at 9:30, I should say. And we've gone from tracking hot temperatures, severe thunderstorms, the tropics, to now a big freeze that's slated to knock on our doors here within the next couple of hours. Got a couple freeze warnings out there in effect for a few of our northwestern counties, and all of us across the viewing area board, much of the Florida Peninsula altogether, are going to be underneath a cold weather advisory. And I know that's a bit of a blanket statement if you ask me, but essentially what National Weather Service is honing in on with that cold weather advisory, they're doing away with the wind chill verbiage. They're changing it up on us. So when they say cold weather, they're talking feels like temperatures below that 32 degrees Fahrenheit mark. And that's exactly where a lot of us are going to hit as we wake up tomorrow morning. We've already seen temperatures drop off in extravagant fashion as we've gone through the late afternoon and early evening hours of tonight, and I'll get you over to that here in just a second. But first, I want to take us to the water vapor to show you exactly what's going on out there. We've got a very aggressive jet stream trough digging down across our area. You can kind of see at the bottom of that trough the shades of yellow, dark brown, that dry air. The channel of dry air down there is the base of our trough, and for this early in the fall season, it's rare to get something down as far south as the Gulf, trying to squeak down towards the Yucatan Channel between the Yucatan Peninsula and the western fringes of Cuba, and through the entirety of the Florida Peninsula down into the northwestern Bahamas. I don't typically like to use the word rare. That's just me. I feel in the weather community, especially over on social media, the term rare is used a little too often to where it's stretched out to the point where it loses its luster. It loses the effect that it would have. And in this case, when I use the term rare, I genuinely mean it. And it's going to be a very weird turn of events, some twists and turns post-Halloween. I know Halloween was about 10 days ago, but definitely in for a bit of some abrupt changes and some dramatic changes as we go over the next 30 to 36 hours together. So once again, good evening to everybody. We're going to give you all the latest info on what's going on down here in our neck of the woods. Time out when the coldest temperatures are to arrive, and then stick around to the end. Not only will I briefly touch on the tropics, because you know me, it's my bread and butter, and we are still technically in the hurricane season, despite Jack Frost trying to sneak in the backsliding door of your house there with these cold temperatures expected to invade overnight tonight. Good evening, everybody, over on the News 6 YouTube channel. I see the chat is alive and well this evening. I'll make sure to get to your questions later on as we get in through the show, but let's keep the train rolling. If not, I'll talk to you too much and I won't get any of the graphics just because I enjoy talking weather with everybody so much. So here is the infrared satellite, and the main reason I have the infrared up is when we use our IR satellite imagery here, what we're looking at is strictly temperatures. Now, yes, you can see clouds, you can see thunderstorms, we've seen full-fledged hurricanes using the satellite imagery here, but what I want you to notice, and I'll stop the loop, and I'm going to bust out my lovely pen tool because you know how much I love to do some Bob Rossin with you. If you look towards the top of the screen here, notice those shades of blue working their way down towards the south over portions of Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and now we're starting to see those shades of color really working their way past Pensacola, Tallahassee, approaching the Jacksonville, St. Augustine area. That is the coldest air coming down. So as soon as we get over to the temperatures, the current temperatures, and then I show you what we're forecasted to drop into as we go through the rest of the night tonight, I'm fairly certain we're going to continue to see some changes. They've been evolving since I got in earlier this afternoon around 2:30. When we started the 4 o'clock newscast, we were in the upper 60s. When we ended the 6 o'clock newscast, we were already in the low 50s. That's how fast the temps are dropping. Needless to say, as that trough comes down and we've had that cold front sweep through us, the thunderstorms and the heavier rainfall we saw yesterday has since been evacuated from our viewing area, so that's no longer an issue for us. And now let's go ahead and fly around Central Florida a little bit together, shall we? So here are the temperatures outside for the metro area of Central Florida. And if you look at the villages, we are already into the upper 40s. Orlando has really come down. We're sitting at 54 degrees. Citrus Ridge at 51. Sanford at 50. Lake Wales, 51. My old stomping grounds in Kissimmee at 52. Bithlo, 53. And then southwestern Polk, little bit of a temperature gradient there. Lakeland at 52 and Bartow at 55. Let's fly on over to the East Coast together. Here we go. Pulling up Volusia County, Flagler, and Brevard. You can see Palm Coast at 49 already. Daytona Beach at a whopping 50 degrees, flirting with those upper 40s. Probably going to happen within the next 30 to 45 minutes. And then Brevard, you're expected to remain one of our more mild counties. Even when we take a look at the forecasted feels-like temperatures for tomorrow morning during the coldest period of tomorrow morning, you'll notice that Brevard is kind of the safe haven. And I use air quotes because it's still going to be chilly. It's still going to be very cold outside. And when you look at the 24-hour temperature change, zooming us back in out towards the metro area, we've seen a descent of about 20 to 25 degrees since this time yesterday. Now, it was a little more impressive when the daytime was ongoing, when the sun was up, because naturally that's when you'll see the greatest change in your warmest portions of the day. Now, this is probably going to level out a little bit. I would imagine that since we started the cooling trend very early yesterday morning, the front came through us between the hours of about midnight to maybe 3 a.m. Obviously, I wasn't awake tracking it at that time, but I know that's what we were pinpointing would be when frontal passage occurred, and that's why we are seeing such an abrupt drop in our temperatures. I'll go ahead and pull up the temperatures for the rest of us so we can get a feel for what's going on out there. You can see Gainesville and Ocala, the overachievers out there, 47 degrees, and the feels-like temperatures are already starting to drop like a rock in a swimming pool at this point in time. And that's because the wind speeds out there are still very impressive. I stepped out earlier for some food and drink just before coming back in for the 9 o'clock cut-in and then this lovely 9:30 weather show with all of you wonderful viewers out there. And if you look, on average, we're gusting between 25 and 30 miles an hour. That is going to leave us with a very hefty wind chill. The wind chill is going to be excessive. Cape Canaveral at 35-mile-an-hour wind gusts right now, which is comparable to a tropical depression working its way onshore near the Space Coast area. When you look at the feels-like temperatures, there you go. These are going to be the kind of the values that we want to monitor over the next 12 hours. This is what it's going to feel like for all of us. Animals, pets, everybody out there included, even the reptiles and the amphibians who unfortunately are just going to have to slow down, almost push pause in their tracks. Y'all ever notice that when it gets really cold outside, if you do stumble upon a frog or a lizard, they're just kind of stationary? They're mobile-less, if that's even a word. Forgive me if it's not. It's a little late. It's been a long day. But you've noticed that they sit still, and that's because they are cold-blooded creatures. And when it gets this chilly outside, they have nothing else to do besides just kind of go dormant is the word I was looking for. And then last but certainly not least, before we start getting into your forecast, look at just how much the muggy meter, the humidity has dropped off out there. This is the first time in a long time where I actually see the little arrow on there go all the way down to the bottom of our graphic there, the bottom of the legend, which is very impressive. We are bone dry across the board, which is something else I also want to touch on when we come back from our first scheduled break. Because there's another detail that despite how cold or how warm it is, as we get deeper into the fall and then eventually make the transition into winter as we get towards late December, there's a kicker here. There's something big that does play a big role in the hurricane season and will continue to evolve as we go over the next couple of months together. So don't go anywhere. Refresh your drink, grab another snack, settle in. We're going to talk all things cold temps, touch on the tropics, and then I'll open up the floor to any questions you may have, and I'll do my best to get to every single one of them. So don't go anywhere, folks. We'll be right back. We're back. All right, so here we go. Let's talk freezing to. I'm sorry, I keep cracking up, not only because of the infamous last words there, but we're going to need another otter. I'm sorry. That story just stands out to me, and I find otters to be some of the most adorable creatures out there. But now let's get back on target here. Let's show you what the forecast lows for tonight are looking like. We've actually seen a little bit of a trend in the southward direction. And by that, I mean our computer models are thinking we could be just a tad bit on the colder side than what they were initially thinking as we worked our way through the weekend, approaching the main event tonight into your Veterans Day morning. If you look at Gainesville, Ocala, the Villages, Wildwood, Palm Coast getting very close to flirting with that threshold as well. You're kissing right up against it. But our northwestern counties are actually forecast to drop to freezing temperatures, if not below freezing temperatures. And the rest of us are going to be in the mid to upper 30s, minus Brevard County. Once again, like I'd mentioned previously, Brevard County is kind of the safe haven if you don't want to get too cold. But then again, this isn't a Goldilocks type of situation where we're sitting just right. No, we're still on the cold side. You're just not quite to the extent as the western half of the state. And it's likely due to that westerly wind component we have coming in, funneling the coldest air off the west coast, the Gulf Coast, and across the peninsula. That's why you can kind of see that gradient, almost a 10 to 13 degree difference between Gainesville and Ocala in Alachua, Marion counties in comparison to easternmost Osceola, Orange, and much of Brevard. Now, the feels like temperatures, this is where they're going to get you. Let me go ahead and change it back. A computer update, or the computer continues to update every now and again. I got to go back in time just a little bit, slide it to about 7 o'clock in the morning on Tuesday as the sun's really coming up over the horizon and we're all getting out the door. This is what it will feel like. So while air temperatures are about 10 to 15 degrees above some of the values you see on your screen here, this is what truly matters the most to every single one of us out there, especially for the folks who unfortunately may not have the means of staying warm now through the rest of the night. I can promise you that we are going to bounce back from this in pretty dramatic and abrupt fashion. By Wednesday, when I show you the temperature trend, we're going to be climbing rapidly out of this, and that's why I emphasize to all of you out there, if you haven't done so already, on top of just simply layering up, making sure the hands, the ears, the nose, the head, etc. are covered up whenever you're outside facing the wrath of these feel-like temperatures, I also recommend you maybe pick up a pack of the emergency vitamin C drops or the gummies. Maybe double check if you have enough multivitamins in the cabinet drawer. Drink some extra vitamin C, some orange apple juice. Apple a day keeps the doctor away, because I can truly testify when temperatures used to do this when I was growing up in Central Florida, go from hot to extremely cold right back to hot again. You'd hear some of our old Christmas home videos and I would sound like this because the cold weather back to the heat immediately got me. This is the fastest way for this to become a breeding ground for the cold and the flu, which is going to be coming up as well. Cold season is just about here, and so is flu season. Now, currently, National Weather Service has all of us under a cold weather advisory since minimum temperatures are going to approach freezing, if not drop below that, but the wind chill will make it feel below freezing for a lot of us. This is valid until 9 a.m., and then National Weather Service also just recently issued for our northernmost counties, Gainesville, Ocala, you're wrapped into this, in the villages of Sumter County, Lake County, you're right on the cusp. You're right up against the border of this. We've got some freeze warnings out there, valid until 8 a.m. So again, tomorrow morning, overnight tonight into your Tuesday morning, it's going to be very cold out. Just like the song, it's cold outside. And if you can stay inside, would highly encourage you do so. Now, I've been using this graphic throughout the day today to kind of track the timing of the cold. I know we're not tracking a physical system or a hurricane, but let's talk temperatures. So, northern counties by about 8 p.m. tonight, we've already verified this. We've dropped below the 53 degrees, which is why I'm glad the graphic kind of just disappeared there on me for a second. The feels like temperatures are going to be between 41 to 43 degrees. We're already there. We're at 9:46 p.m. this evening, and we are definitely have surpassed that. We can check the box next to that block. By 2 a.m., temperatures on average from Brevard, Osceola, Polk, further north you go, are going to be sitting between 40 and 43 degrees, with those feels-like temperatures getting down below 30 degrees across the board in Central Florida. And then we wake up at around 5 to 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. The harshest cold will settle in, and the wake-up temps will feel like 23 to 32 degrees. So now bundle up at home as well. If you have the opportunity to do so and you're not too thin-skinned from living in Florida for too long, I can wholeheartedly say I myself have noticed the blood has thinned out a little bit. I stepped outside earlier and I'm like, okay, maybe I will need a jacket after all, but it's the wind chill. It's the winds that get you. Maybe crack the window, get some of that cool, dry air, and wake up to a nice breeze when you first start the day tomorrow. Kind of kick Veterans Day off on a high note. And with that being said, for your Veterans Day, we could be looking at some record-setting temperatures, both in the low-end department and for the warmest part of the day, topping out somewhere between 56 to 59 degrees. We're forecasting a 58-degree high temperature in Central Florida, particularly the Orlando area. tomorrow morning, which would definitely set records on both sides. I have a full article written up on clickorlando.com if you want to check that out. See if we do end up verifying those forecasts as well as busting those records right out of the water from dating back into the 1800s, the late 1800s, and the early 1900s. So with that being said, let's go ahead and take another quick 3-minute break. When we come back, I'll touch briefly on the tropics and then open up the floor to your questions. And then I'll skedaddle, get out of your hair, jump in for the 10 o'clock newscast over in the studio. So we'll be right back with y'all here momentarily. Okay, so we've kind of touched on how brutally cold it's going to be for the next 24 hours. I want to leave you before we head on over to the tropics department with a little bit of good news. So remember I mentioned that we were going to bounce back in pretty rapid fashion. We'll take a look at the temperature trend for the next 7 days. Very, very abrupt dip in the temps between Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. But then by Wednesday afternoon, we're already back into the 70s with a pretty warm and above average weekend in store for us as we get into your Saturday and Sunday. So this is why I was mentioning, if you haven't been able to boost your immune system quite yet, maybe get out for some light or moderate exercise when the weather cooperates, or head on over to the gym. I went over to the gym this morning and I thought it was funny because you could tell Central Florida's getting chilly outside, because I looked around and I'm like, there's nobody here. There's nobody here. All right, so I also wanted to mention this real briefly. If you look, as we get closer to the Thanksgiving holiday, after this very blink and you miss it freezing weather outbreak here in Central Florida, especially northern Florida, Climate Prediction Center and a lot of our long-range computer models suggest we could be wandering towards a warm if not at least a mild and somewhat muggy Thanksgiving and Black Friday. We'll have to see, because naturally there's a lot of changes that tend to occur with the timing of upcoming cold fronts and fall/winter style systems, but Climate Prediction Center is on board with the temperatures remaining on the more tame side after this. Now, the classic watching the tropics, because National Hurricane Center, I should say hurricane season, still has about another 20 days to go before National Hurricane Center stops these recurring outlooks. But as you can see, despite all that disorganized weather down there in the Caribbean, we're not expecting any tropical activity over the next 7 days. Now, we're going to still keep monitoring, especially me, the Western Caribbean, because I do want to show you this really fast. I've been watching what our velocity anomaly product has been doing, where we tend to look for the rising and the falling motions in the atmosphere, and we still have a pretty optimal environment headed our way here very soon. So, if anything, last hurricane season most definitely taught me that it ain't over until it's over, but as of right now, where we stand, there's nothing to be concerned about, and I'm not seeing any glaring signals out there whatsoever. So let's see. Do we have any questions on the chat? Minus Jody, I'd mentioned that didn't see your email, unfortunately, my friend. So if you want to resend it, absolutely. And no, Jonathan will be back in, I believe, on Wednesday. You've got me once again at the helm tomorrow. Sorry to say. I'm just kidding. No, I love talking weather with you guys. This is my bread and butter, especially the live discussions. Thankfully, we didn't have to do any wall-to-wall coverage for any hurricanes, so this is probably my one and only way I can reach out and actually have that conversation with you all, as opposed to it being very one direction whenever I'm on camera shooting a video or over there in front of the green screen. And yep, Kiera Henry says, we're back. Indeed, we are. But this is where we have to start saying goodbye and good night. So everybody out there, if you can, make sure you stay safe tonight. I know that sounds a little hyperbole of me, but to tell you the truth, as we all know, here in Central Florida, we're no stranger to the thunderstorms and the tropical systems, but we definitely do think freezing temperatures are a little on the foreign territory side for a lot of us. In fact, the snowbirds are probably wandering in this general direction right now, trying to escape all this cold weather that's going to be surging into their area a lot more consistently than what we're going to see down here in Florida. And with that being said, a little tease for some future discussions I want to host: the fire danger and the drought potential that we may be faced with as we go through the rest of November, December, into the calendar start of the winter season, as La Nina, despite holding on by a thread, continues to crank in the tropical Pacific. I'll have more on that to come very soon, but if anything... Oh, Zachary Berger, there you go. I'm glad you asked that question. Before we wrap up, I got to punch out of here in just a couple seconds. I do think we have a pretty high shot at seeing ENSO neutral conditions come back for next year, especially as we get through the spring, headed for the summer. And I do think we have a pretty good shot at developing an El Nino. We'll talk more about that at a future time. I'll have a full in-depth breakdown and my thoughts. I'll work on the discussion for every one of you out there. If you want to chat with me, we'll try to host a live discussion, or maybe do a video here at News 6 or over on social media somewhere. But until next time, folks, I gotta run for the 10 o'clock newscast. I hope you can tune in. You've been an amazing audience as always, and we'll talk to you again very soon. But until then, this is the Digital Weather Center signing out.